President Baum, members of the board, it is a pleasure to ask the task force. I'll give them just a second to find their seat. But by way of introduction of this activity, this actually goes back quite some time to my predecessor, Jack Scott, who actually formed at the request of the Consultation Council the first accreditation task force. And since that time, there's been not only that task force, but a number of other activities that have taken place over the last several years. And then, as the board will recall, last year, the state auditor did a audit report on the Accrediting Commission, and it's no secret the auditor has no purview over the Accrediting Commission, so they made those audit findings to the Chancellor's office. And so it was at that time that we reactivated the accreditation task force, and they have recently completed their work, and the board has received that report previously, and it's in this document again today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chancellor Pam Walker, who chaired this group, and she and her colleagues will give you a briefing.
President Baum, Vice President Estolano, Chancellor Harris, Board. In the last several years, there have been a variety of reports, resolutions, and recommendations that have been issued by individual organizations and through joint efforts regarding accreditation for the California community colleges. In each of these were expressed concerns about the current accreditation process, including that June 2014 state audit report titled California Community College Accreditation. Colleges are treated inconsistently and opportunities exist for improvement in the accreditation process. That report suggested several recommendations to the Chancellor's office, including monitor community colleges for issues that may jeopardize accreditation, remove language from its regulations naming ACCJC as the sole accreditor of the California community colleges, encourage the flexibility in choosing an accreditor, and identify other regional accreditors who are able to accredit California community colleges or who would be willing to change their scope to do so. And third, prompt the Chancellor's office to engage the Commission on behalf of the 112 colleges, now 113. The report, the report of the state auditor charged the Chancellor to be more involved by protecting the state's interest in accreditation. In response to the accreditation recommendations, that report's recommendations, one, the colleges be monitored. The Chancellor has developed a new division of institutional effectiveness that oversees the development and operation of a comprehensive technical assistance program by developing a framework of indicators focused on accreditation and other issues. In response to the accreditation regarding the accrediting body, that recommendation, at the March 2015 Board of Governors meeting, the BOG approved the accreditation, that accreditation shall be determined only by an accrediting agency recommended by the Chancellor and approved by the Board of Governors, removing the language naming ACCJC. I think it's important to know the strands of issues that this task force dealt with, including currently accreditation is focused on compliance rather than improvement, inconsistent and equitable treatment, unclear expectations, lack of transparency and public participation, lack of alignment with other regional accreditors, inadequate and poor quality training, lack of collaboration and lack of respect for colleges and key stakeholder groups, overstepping of rules and responsibilities, and lack of evaluation or a safe mechanism for feedback to the Commission. To frame our work, it is important to know that consistent calls for reform of the accrediting process and change on the part of the Accrediting Commission have been raised by the Chancellor's Office, administrative organizations, faculty groups, classified staff, and voices outside the college system. They've all encouraged engagement. So the charge of the 2015 task force was to evaluate the current state of accreditation for community colleges in California and to recommend to the Chancellor and the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges possible courses of action that will best serve students in our 113 college system. However, in approaching this charge, the task force determined that rather than focus primarily on all the past difficulties, that this report should be aspirational and should identify the qualities that would constitute an ideal accrediting agent. And so, engagement, prompt engagement. So the members of the task force represent various constituent groups within the community college system, including administration, faculty, trustees, accreditation liaison officers, and the chancellor's office. We have some task force members in the audience today. Two of our group are Stan Carzoza, the superintendent president of College of Sequoias, and Joanne Waddell, the president of LA College Faculty Guild, AFT 1521, besides my colleagues here. So now, allow me to introduce first Rich Hansen from the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges, who will focus on the history and background of accreditation and these many task forces. Steve Bloom, a trustee from the Ventura District, who will concentrate on the importance and commitment of peer review. David Morris, president of the Academic Senate for the California Community Colleges, who will speak to the ideal attributes of an accrediting body. And Dr. Cindy Miles, Chancellor of the Grossmont-Cuyamaca District, speaking to the task force findings and recommendations and looking forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Hansen. I spoke earlier this morning as well. I represent often two different groups, the independent unions in the state, but also Faculty Association of California Community Colleges, and it was in that regard that I was on all three task forces. I teach math at De Anza College, but I'm really an historian at heart, so I'm happy to give you a little history. It's really a history of an evolution from one task force to the other, so I'll start with really the beginning, a little before, well, quite a bit before there were any task forces. The commission changed in a big way the accrediting standards back in the early 2000s, moving to a data-based approach where data was supposed to drive decision-making. A component of that was SLOs, student learning outcomes, and that was a controversial topic among faculty because faculty felt that this was redundant, that we already do something called grading, that is an assessment of our students, and many were arguing, and a lot from my triple CI group, that it was not a good use of their time. In 2009, focused on really that issue, that group wrote up a resolution, basically a vote of no confidence in the accrediting commission, and we presented it at Consultation Council. Out of that came, and there were already problems because we were already suffering from a rather high level of sanctions, and out of that came the first task force. And this was at a time when my own local group from College of the Redwoods was, I think, the only one at that point on show cause. And it was about being behind in SLOs. And I know that faculty worked very hard to get back on track and did successfully get off show cause on that. But in the 2009 task force, we really had our kind of day of reckoning in 2010 when the chancellor was going to present our 7 recommendations. We did a survey and found that there were problems that we wanted to address, and the idea was to make some recommendations about how to cooperate better. And at that point, the chancellor was refused the opportunity to speak to the commission. We weren't on the agenda for the open session, and it looked like the door was closed. It turned out, through some behind-the-scenes activity, that the chancellor did get to have 5 minutes with the commission in closed session. Essentially, the argument was that we represented really the chancellor's office and the system, and as such, we were a third party. The argument was that the colleges themselves were the only real voices to be heard. But one of the things our survey showed was that the colleges themselves were somewhat intimidated because of this high rate of sanctions, and it's public. So it's really a difficult thing to overcome. Moving on to, no, that's okay, so that's it. So moving on to the next one, the second task force was formed in 2013. And at this point, Redwoods was back on sanction, show cause sanction. So was Cuesta, and also the City College of San Francisco was on show cause. That had just really gotten started. At the time, like I said, the faculty were originally concerned about SLOs, but there was a FAC workshop on this topic at that time, and from all of the faculty from these colleges, the message was it was really more about governance than SLOs. There were issues about trustees, there were issues about organization of the college. It was not what we expected at all. In fact, it was a bit more weighty, in fact. So that was the background then for that second group, a shift a bit more toward governance. And that second group was divided. Consensus around trying to accommodate and find a way to work together was not so completely solidly held. So as you probably know, a report out of that group just never was published. The other thing that was happening at that point, too, was there was an acceleration of the City College situation. And if you were following it in the papers, you know what I was talking about, am talking about. So then we come to our third task force, and I am just about at the end of my story. And the thing about this task force, and it included a few people from the second one, including me, there was a pretty strong, I would say, very strong unanimity from the start. The feeling had changed from trying to accommodate, trying to get along, and frustration at this point, and a feeling of the need to move on, look to the future of the system, and look for the proper accreditor. And of course, the driving force was that JLAC audit, which ironically enough turned the whole issue back to the Chancellor's office, that so-called third party, to say, Chancellor's office, here are recommendations. Pam just told you about them. And the Chancellor's office was put front and center to really try to cope with this problem. And so here we are today. Thank you.
It says here good morning, but I guess it's afternoon now. As Dr. Walker said, I'm a trustee from Ventura. I'm also on the CCCT, the League's trustee board for the state, who I'm happy to announce has endorsed this report. So what is in the best interest of students? Thousands of educators who serve our state and its students go to work each day with this in mind. The 2015 State Chancellor's Accreditation Task Force was guided by the same question in formulating its conclusions and recommendations regarding the accreditation process for the California community colleges. As you know, leadership is not always easy, and this task force was presented with a difficult task. After much debate and discussion, the task force determined the best interest of our students is not being served by the current system of accreditation. The process should consist of transparent, collegial, peer review that seeks to improve and enhance our colleges, not one based on compliance and punitive measures. We understand and appreciate the role of accreditation organization is not easy. However, we must resist the temptation of playing whack-a-mole with our community colleges and its students. We should reject the silly notions that discrediting placing public schools like Aspen Award-winning Santa Barbara City College on sanctions or closing them improves conditions for students. Accreditation should be not be something that is feared and viewed with trepidation. Accreditation should be a process in which educators help each other progress. One that is looked forward to with anticipation because esteemed peers will be arriving to acknowledge the school's strengths and help them to improve and better serve students. Substantial and bold changes are needed to ensure California's 2.3 million community college students are served to the best of our ability. Our students are depending on us. I am confident meaningful and real changes can and will occur.
So the want to stress first that there was on this task force a very strong faculty voice, both in terms of having several representatives and also of engagement with the conversation. And I stress that because I think that it's a very important thing in the sense that the things that accreditation should be about serving our students, about our instructional programs, about our services, depend upon the faculty's cooperation and the faculty's involvement. And the faculty groups, not only the Academic Senate, but the other faculty groups have been raising concerns about accreditation for several years. And so I think our very strong participation in this task force was something that was very important and very much appreciated. The structure of the report, as we got together and talked about what we wanted to do, it starts with some background and some context in order to explain how we came to where we are. But the majority of the report talks about what we would like to see, and that's very important. As Vice Chancellor Walker said, we decided that we did not want to write a report rehashing past complaints, that we didn't want to write a report that focused on the number of institutions on sanction, although those things are certainly mentioned, but they are not the focus of the report. The focus is, this is what we want to see, this is what we think accreditation should be, and this is the ideal that we are looking for. And so in constructing that ideal, we did look at previous reports, we did look at some of the things that had been raised, but really the questions that we were asking are if we could construct the accreditor that we would want to see, that would serve our system as it is now, with the various things that we are facing, with the changes that we are experiencing in terms of our mission and in other ways, what would that accreditor look like? And so you have within the report 9 ideal attributes that we identified that these are the things that we would like to see, these are the things that we would expect and feel that we need from an accreditor for our system. And I won't go through and try to read the 9 attributes for you because hopefully you've read the report and you've seen them, but you see in looking at them that again, they're not focused on complaints or on the past, but rather on looking for an accreditor that would be transparent, that would promote academic and instructional excellence and improvement, and that would promote and share in mutual respect, both among the various constituencies within the system, but also respect between the accreditor and the system. Those are really the things that we were looking for and what a lot of those ideal attributes boil down to. I want to note that first off, I want to commend Vice Chancellor Walker, as well as Vice Chancellors Tenna and Paul Feist, who were involved with the task force, but who, to my perception at least, in no way tried to direct or control the task force. These recommendations, this report came very much out of the constituent voices. Again, we were given assistance and support by the Chancellor's office, but were in no way controlled. This comes from the field and from the representatives of the different constituent groups. And as Rich noted, with unanimity, I did not hear anyone disagree on this task force. Previous groups may have been divided, may have had some holdups because they weren't all on the same page. This task force, I heard no sense of anyone disagreeing with the findings at all. At most, there were a couple of people that worried about what the consequences would be. And Rich also mentioned that in the past, the sense of intimidation from anyone who perhaps spoke up, but no one was disagreeing. And I would say, as perhaps an editorial comment, that the fact of that fear of what will happen if we criticize our accreditor, is as good an example as I can give you of the problem and of why we are where we are at this point. So I think that this is something that has come from all of us, that we are very much in unanimity on, and came to not only in terms of the structure of the report of what we wanted to see, but also to agreement on the recommendations, which Chancellor Miles will discuss. So.
Thank you so much. May I just thank you first of all for being such a great board and giving us our independent warrant authority for Grossmont Cuyamaca so we can do our own thing. Thank you very much. I haven't been to a Board of Governors meeting in more than a year, and I'm really enjoying the new faces and the new perspectives. It's quite heartwarming to see the kinds of questions that are being asked, the engagement. So thank you. I come to this, I want to give you just a little background about myself because I think the contextual piece makes sense, someone like our historian. I come with 25 years of higher education experience, 16 years as a senior administrator, and most pertinent to this, I'm an outsider. I'm in my 7th year in California as chancellor of the Grossmont-Cuyamaca district. So I have worked in 5 states under 3 different accrediting commissions. So I have engaged on teams, been part of, receiving, gone through reaffirmation. And in fact, in my job as president of the Hialeah campus, I was a founding president in Miami-Dade. I had the opportunity to get to move us through the substantive change process to get the authority for this to be a standalone campus in the Miami-Dade district under the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. So I have a perspective about accreditation that may be a little bit different from my colleagues. Like Rich, I was on task forces 2.0 and 3.0. I didn't have 1.0 experience, and so I drew this short straw. I mean, I was invited to be on these task forces because of my role on the CEO board. At the time that Chancellor Harris convened the second task force, I was president of the CEO board. So it was in that capacity that I joined the task force as the representatives for CEOs. I'd like to give a shout out to our current CEO board president, Chancellor Ron Galatolo, who is in the audience, from Chancellor San Mateo. And he's leading the conversation among the CEOs at this time, where we are going through our consultative process. Our CEO board comprises representatives from various regions. This is the way we run things in this state. So the voices are being gathered from various regions. I can say that right now, my region, Region 10, the San Diego and Imperial County Community College Association, has already given our support uniformly. 10 colleges have signed on, and the letter has been given to Chancellor Harris. I would also add, before I go into the recommendations and the findings and recommendations in a little bit more detail, just a thank you for receiving this tome. And if you haven't had the chance to dig through it, it's 268 pages, but the actual report is only 9 pages long, so you can do that. But what's important is all these other reports that are mentioned here, the background data, the report that Rich talked about, the very first recommendations from Task Force 1.0, when Chancellor Jack Scott is in here for you to look at. The RP report, the recommendations that the CEO board had made. And then if you take the time to look at the crosswalk that points that they're on pages 12 through 19, it's in tabular form. You can see the consistency of the findings, the recommendations that were made year after year after year from multiple constituent groups, which is what I think captured our attention and led us more quickly in this incarnation of this task force to concerted recommendations than we had been before. Rich is right. On the second task force, we were not in total agreement. I was on the side of the table arguing hard and boldly for conciliation and for cooperation with our accreditor. Others were not on the same side. And we had crafted a set of recommendations for our colleges, a set of recommendations for the commission, and a set of recommendations that we would do collectively. Those are still all very good recommendations. But I think what happened as this very diverse group of people came together in this over the last several months, that we did not come lightly to our conclusions. And we began to realize that what we shared is a concerted devotion to our students and to the difference that accreditation makes for our students, for our institutions, of course. We're all fierce protectors of, and our constituents. We represent different constituent groups and others who are not at this table. But we have a very collective concern for students and the difference that what's happening with accreditation in our region is making. So when we went quickly through the past, looked at that crosswalk, you can look at all those. Vice Chancellor Walker went through the major findings, those 9 themes that we found universally. We reflected on the high level of sanctions. By the way, of the 37 colleges out of the 113 that have not been on sanction in the last 10 years, my 2 are among those 37 that have not received sanction. I have no axe to grind in this discussion. And I think that's an important thing to say. I may be calling for help later. We don't. I've had friends say, "What are you thinking?" But I wholeheartedly support these recommendations with nothing personal in it from myself or the institutions that I represent. Most important, we moved our discussions very quickly to what we need in an accreditor, as my colleague David Morse said. And I need to also pause and say that the sharp, clear, easy-to-read language is a result of his great writing skills. So, David, we want to thank you. Honestly, he's a great author, and he would bring together. I think you mentioned that the vice chancellors, the staff members, didn't try to influence us. They couldn't have if they tried. This is a fierce group of colleagues, strong-minded people with lots of experience. So he worked through these various voices and found a collective voice that I think is clean and clear and decisive. Again, as I said, looked at the changing needs of our students. I couldn't help but think as I listened to all the conversations today, themes across the board, whether we're talking about the changes in leadership that Josh Weiner was saying, when he says we need to change from, we tend to select leaders who are risk averse. We tend to select leaders who will be, financially secure, keep us safe. The world is changing. The forces on our community colleges, and more importantly, the needs of our students are changing dramatically, as are our workforce needs. Dramatic changes, even the transportation talks about the massive changes that are going on impacting our system. So what we wanted was to look at what will help us meet our current needs, those for our students, and to have the system be as strong as it can be, and for the future of our system. This is what took us to the findings that you've heard prefaced, where we said, overall, universally, we found that the practices, the track record, and the structure of the other 5 regional accrediting areas that integrate all the institutions of higher ed under one accrediting umbrella are superior and preferable to the kind of structure that we have right now. So we found, and you see these outlined on page 8 if you're following along, that the current structure of accreditation that we have in our region no longer serves our current, but more importantly, our future needs. We find that our current commission does not measure up to the expectations that were the attributes that we outlined in section 3 of the document that David went over. We also found collectively that the repeated requests and recommendations for change have yielded few significant improvements. Now, I will say, I do want to say, we know that efforts have been made. We know we've had, and I can just speak from the CEOs, we've had multiple meetings with members of the commission and staff, and we exchange information. We've done this every year that I've been in the system. We have seen changes. We have seen incremental changes. There's plans to have a statewide conference. The accrediting cycle was expanded to 7 years. We have seen a new set of standards come forward. But what we're saying is that this isn't enough, and we need a more systemic and transformational change to be able to do what we need to do. And we, in general, we say that our constituents that we're representing have lost confidence in our current structure. The recommendations that you find outlined on page 8 and 9 are very clear-cut. They're very bold, I will say. And we are asking, and we want to, I'll stop at this moment and just thank the Chancellor for receiving this, for holding, for having the courage to hold this task force. It wasn't something he wanted to do either. I can guarantee you the pressures mounted and he had to do this. But it took a great courage and leadership, so we thank you, Chancellor Harris, for convening the task force and give us this opportunity for receiving this and the recommendations that we're bringing to the board today. So our recommendation is that the Chancellor's office should investigate all available avenues for a new model for accreditation, including options such as, and we outlined 2, there may be others, a combined accrediting commission with community colleges joining WASC, Senior College and University Commission, in keeping with the prevalent models that we find in all the other regions of the country, and or look for another regional accreditor to serve our California community colleges. We recommend number 2, that this evaluation be done expeditiously. In fact, our bold request is that it be done by spring to bring a recommendation for action to this board. We got one. And number 3, meanwhile, but to be very respectful, accreditation is something that we all value. I've participated in accreditation my entire higher education career. The value of a peer review process where you do the very hard self-reflection and then have experienced peers come in and look with you to try to improve against a set of standards that we collectively engage in is very, very important. So we want to also recommend that we continue in whatever process is going forward to work in a cooperative and proactive manner with our current accreditor. I would end by saying this is not about the past. It's not even about the present, although there are a lot of present implications for all of us. This is genuinely about taking a very forward look for the future of the California community colleges, the students that we serve, our communities. And I thank you for your time.
I want to extend my thanks to the task force for their hard work on this, especially now recalling that Richard Hansen served on 3 successive task forces. He's really earned his stripes on this one.
That's the shortest straw.
This is for this very, very, very powerful report. Member Malumet and I have been on the Board of Governors, and we started noticing an epidemic of sanction happening several years ago, and saying that something's out of whack here, and we need to take a look at it. Say, why is there this epidemic of sanctioning going on in our system, where we also have all these evaluation mechanisms, so that and it didn't match up with what we'd been hearing and evaluating with our own systems of evaluating the system. So this is very helpful. We have a lot of members of the public who would like to address the board on this topic, but then I'm going to ask the Chancellor also to say, where do we go from here now that we have these recommendations, and then how we can implement the recommendations with the Chancellor's office first. So do you want to address that first?
Let me address that. Thank you again, task force members, for your work and for your presentation today. What we anticipate is that this is really the beginning of what we expect to be a very robust conversation, and that we would come back to you in November with recommendations. And at that point, it would be recommendations for taking action to move forward to make a decision on the future of accreditation for the system, which we would expect to bring back to you in the form of a recommendation as the task force requested in March of next year. And at that point, we would hope to come to you with recommendations on exactly what direction the system should take in terms of accreditation. So 3 steps: this one for information, next month forward to you, or next meeting in November, forward to you with a recommendation on the next course of action, and then back to you in March of next year with a clear recommendation on a direction in which the system would move.
Thank you. So we will turn to public comment, and then we will have board member discussion. And so we are going to observe a strict 3-minute time limit. You will hear a loud alarm go off at 3 minutes.
Change it from pretty chimes to something obnoxious.
No,
And then the hook comes out.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to call up 3 at a time, just for purposes of timeliness. If all 3 could come up, we have 3 microphones. That way folks can just kind of move in order. Sharon Vogel, Alvin Jaw, and Ellen D'Souza. And Ms. Vogel, go right ahead while the rest are coming up.
Sharon Vogel, a FAC president and also nursing faculty, and as a nurse, I do evaluate that peer and self evaluation time, and therefore I value the accreditation process. I'm very grateful for this team's hard work and the reflection. And in the future, as was stated at Consultation Council, it's going to take courage on many of the constituent groups to have that active discussion and reflection time and step up to support these task force recommendations. And I know at our next FAC board meeting, we'll be having that discussion and forwarding this for an action item. But our past positions have already reflected that we would support this in principle. FAC sponsored a bill this year, AB 404, which is now awaiting the governor's signature from Assemblyman Chu, that is not in conflict with these recommendations. In fact, it supports them. What it will allow, in our conversation, we visited Washington, D.C., and we also have had multiple conversations with the Department of Education about how could we give them feedback, no matter who our accrediting agency is, how could we provide them with feedback when they allow for it. And this bill would allow for a process by which we could give any accrediting agency who steps in to be our accreditor that feedback. And it would be anonymous and from multiple constituent groups. So I urge you to support AB 404 and urge the governor to sign it. Because the Department of Ed did state that many of the other states don't have this process, and they would like our feedback in an organized manner rather than random people just sending it in. They would love to have some organized feedback, and this would provide an organized method for which us to give to NSECI and the Department of Ed feedback regarding whoever is accrediting us. So I urge you to know that. And we know these next few months that it will be critical to look forward. And FAC looks forward to providing our support and our conversation. And any work that we can do on behalf to help you, please let us know. We are excited about this process and can hardly wait to see where it goes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jaw.
I would like to summarize the Accreditation Task Force report in one word. The Commission is incorrigible. It is not, it's already had 8 years of misbehavior, and the time is now not just to have information and discussion, it's time to act. Okay, and what do I mean? The most critical thing is that third-party comments for in front of NSECI ends this Friday. And I think it's incumbent upon the board and the chancellor to submit a third-party comment telling them that the community colleges do not support ACCJC. This is incredibly important. It's time critical. And I really think you need to do it as the very first step.
Thank you very much. We have Alan D'Souza, followed by Jeff Freitas. Mr. Freitas, if you could come up, and Dr. Anita Greer. Go ahead, Mr. D'Souza.
Thank the board for initiating this task force report and considering it and looking at it very closely. As you examine the contents and the recommendations, I asked the governing board to very closely consider the conclusion and the recommendations. The task force found little evidence that ACCJC has the ability or willingness to improve its processes and performance, especially those governing transparency, collegiality, and consistency. The task force further urges that no delay be taken in following the recommendations of the task force and finding an alternative accreditor for the Community College of California without further delay. Right. So we ask this to be as soon as possible. I'm concerned about the 8 to 10 year timeline that has been projected and recently for how long this process could be taken. And I appreciate that the board's going to look at this in November and then again in March. But please proceed with expediency. There's significant impact on our community colleges. A culture of fear has been permeated throughout the state by the punitive nature of the ACCJC, which has applied inconsistent and unpredictable application of the standards that we are required to follow. This has affected our students who are uncertain whether their class credits will transfer, whether their programs will be allowed to continue, or whether it will be the piece of paper they receive will actually be worth anything when they graduate. This has also precipitated a huge drop in enrollment throughout the state, although there are other reasons for that too. But the fear of what accreditation has brought down on the colleges that are impacted has been dire. Beyond students, faculty have also been impacted, especially long-time faculty who, if their programs and cuts affect them and are forced to retirement, these are folks who may not have an alternative to enter the workforce again, and that's a serious consideration to be made. But it's not only the are more tenured, faculty. They're also the newer faculty who are fearful whether this career choice that they've made is something they should continue with. In fact, just yesterday, I received a notice, a call from my colleague, fantastic, energetic, involved colleague who has decided to move on to another institution because one consideration was his future under the accreditation rules at our college. And in fact, he said, in the classroom, ACCJC's arbitrary and non-transformational policies have sabotaged his work in the classroom.
Mr. D'Souza, your time has elapsed. Thank you. Jeff Freitas, followed by Dr. Anita Greer, and then Martin Hittleman.
Thank you. Thank you, President Baum, board members, and thank you, Chancellor Harris, for having this task force. I am Jeff Freitas, the Secretary-Treasurer of the CFT, the California Federation of Teachers, and I'm speaking on behalf of the members of CFT. We believe it is critical that the report's recommendations of replacing ACCJC be implemented as swiftly as possible. And we are ready to assist so that our state can move, as the report says, to a timely development of the robust accreditation structure that other regions enjoy and that California lacks. It is our firm belief that ACCJC does not respect the law and the educational rights of California residents. The Commission acts as if it is unaccountable to anyone and can no longer be trusted to serve as the accreditor of any California community college. 2 years ago, and we're passing around this letter that I'm summarizing, 2 years ago, the CFT, which represents a majority of community college faculty in California, filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education, and we presented at the Nisiki hearing in D.C. We presented about ACCJC's failure to comply with multiple accreditation standards. We were compelled to take this extraordinary action by the agency's destructive actions, most notably in regard to San Francisco City College, but also significant destructive actions across the state, which you have seen in the task force. And in part, as a result of our complaint, the U.S. Department of Education issued a letter detailing the ACCJC's lack of compliance with 15 accreditation standards required for continued recognition as an accreditor. Since then, the Superior Court, ruling that the agency broke 4 laws, is ill-considered decision to shutter City College of San Francisco, a report from California's Joint Legislative Audit Committee in June of 2014, a bipartisan legislative action seeking to bring greater transparency and accountability to ACCJC, and even this board, this governing board, has taken action to remove regulatory language that has originally given the ACCJC sole authority over accreditation of the state's community colleges. These actions represent a sea of change in public perception of the agency. The CFT's critique to Nisiki of 2 years ago has now become mainstream opinion. I'm trying to shortchange this. One important reason why the shift in public understanding at ACCJC took so long was fear of the ACCJC's sanctioning powers, and that was even mentioned by some of the task force members. And a well-deserved reputation for vindictiveness, which kept many college administrators and trustees silent. Republican State Senator Jim Nielsen, I have personal friends on both sides of the House, but CFT, the union, doesn't often work with Republicans. Just want to point that out. Provided a glimpse.
Mr. Freitas, your time has elapsed. I'm so sorry, since you were going to be nonpartisan.
I'm sorry, there was no warning that I had 30 seconds left.
I gave you a 30-second warning. I did. It's okay.
That you move swiftly.
Thank
with
you.
The accreditations.
Appreciate that. Dr. Anita Greer, Martin Hellman, followed by Timothy Killikelly.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Anita Greer, former president of the board, City College of San Francisco, and a graduate of City College. In our struggle at City College of San Francisco to survive as a true community college that serves all the communities in our great and diverse city, I have been encouraged by individual messages of support, mass demonstrations, criticism of the ACCJC by the Department of Education, Superior Court Judge Carno's decision the state bipartisan audit, various enlightenment legislative acts, and the recent report of the California Community College Chancellor Office Task Force on Accreditation. The two messages that encourage me and validate the wisdom and the humanity of our popular struggle at City College are the following. A short time after the ACCJC had imposed the show cause sanction on City College, I attended a meeting in the Bay Area of community college administrators, members of the boards of trustees, and after that, an African-American woman approached me and said, and I quote, "I'm glad the ACCJC is picking on San Francisco City College because you people know how to defend yourselves," end of quote. And on page 8 of the recent State Chancellor's Task Force report on the ACCJC are two statements that no one in this room can dismiss or rationalize. And I quote, "The structure of accreditation in this region no longer meets the current and anticipated needs of the California community colleges. The California community college system and its member institutions have lost confidence in the ACCJC. It's my view and hope that Chancellor Harris and the Board of Governors have finally concluded that the ACCJC should no longer be recognized by the United States Department of Education as an authorized accrediting agency and will convey that position to the Department of Education before the deadline of September 25th, 2015.
30
and that
seconds.
In December that this year, Chancellor Harris will present in person at the State Chancellor's Task Force report on the ACCJC. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you. Martin Himmelman, Timothy Killikelly, and then James McFadden.
My name is Martin Hiddleman. I went to community college, taught in the community colleges for almost 50 years. I've been on consultation council. I came to Board of Governors meetings for maybe 20 years. So I know something about the system. I started fighting against ACCJC many, many years ago. Compton College, when they lost their accreditation, I took personal responsibility for not fighting hard enough and getting enough people to fight what I thought was racism on the part of ACCJC and the kind of disrespect that we've seen now that everybody recognizes. I want to make sure that the board and Bryce Harris puts forward the report to the U.S. Department of Education at the very least, puts it in the form of Word, in Word format, so in fact it's acceptable to the Department of Education. But I think at a minimum you have to do that. It's really important. It's time for the Board of Governors to stop being deniers. Just like deniers for global warming, just like some deniers for Galileo. Now that took quite a bit of time for the Catholic Church to decide that, in fact, Galileo is right. I'm just hoping that the Board of Governors doesn't take that long to understand the horrors, the destruction that ACCJC has perpetrated on the community colleges of California. I'm sorry to say that the Board of Governors and their actions around City College of San Francisco have not been helpful. And I hope that at this point you look more circumspect about what you've been doing. Now, I've put in a list for your perusal of some of the things that you might want to write as far as which sections of federal regulations are being routinely violated by ACCJC. There are other things that are not quite in there, that don't fall within the federal regulations. The lack of fair due process was raised before. It's difficult to show. The lack of academics on visiting teams is still apparent. Barbara Bino still is unwilling to recognize the definition of academics. It was told to her by the U.S. Department of Education in the court case. She made very clear that she still doesn't
30
believe.
seconds.
And you can go through all of these things. But finally, I'd like to say It is time to end the nightmare accreditation assault on California's community colleges. You should begin the process of finding another accreditor, not within, and stop the talk of 5 to 10 years, and help Compton College get back their accreditation. I think at the very minimum, the colleges, we must stop the colleges lockstep
Thank you, Mr. Himmelman. Your time is-
ACCJC mandated madness.
Thank you. Timothy Killikelly, followed by James McFadden, and then Dean Murakami.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Tim Killikelly, president of AFT 2121, a faculty union at City College of San Francisco. And I first want to thank the Accreditation Task Force for the fine work that they've done and coming up with what I consider some bold and truthful recommendations and proposals. As we all know, this has been a long time coming. The history has been recited here. In particular, the two pieces of history that seem the most recently for us is the audit report that really kind of made this process happen here, and also the lawsuit in San Francisco, the Herrera lawsuit, as well. And I think to me, it's not even just what the audit report says or what the judge said, but I also find it interesting was their response, the ACCJC's response. And so when it came, their response, official response to the audit report was just amazing to me. It was shrill and defensive rather than no reflection at all. Similar in the Herrera lawsuit, it was almost humorous where they kind of acted like they'd won the lawsuit when they actually hadn't won the lawsuit. And so this history has given rise to people taking action. And you should know that this board should take action, and we need to get rid of them as the accreditor. That's what needs to happen. And others are in the process of taking action as well. My local and California Federation of Teachers has a lawsuit that's going forward, different lawsuit. It's going forward. In the California legislature, AB 404 is now at the governor's desk. AB 1397, although it's now a 2-year bill, is also moving forward in the state legislature. And there's actually a new audit going to be done about what happened at Compton Community College. So that's also happening. And of course, as mentioned before, in December there'll be a meeting of NASICI, and they will be dealing with reviewing ACC's accreditation to be an accreditor. So all these things are happening. Other folks are ready to take action and are
30 seconds.
Thank you. And so you need to follow through as well. We want to work cooperatively to make sure that the proposals that come forward are going to be credible, that are going to work for the whole system. We recommend looking at things like moving to a different regional accreditor. Other regional accreditors exist who may be able to be taking this work on. And we want to make sure that you understand that even though we've had our critiques and we at City College have been, thank you, at ground zero of this, we want to move forward and work together to make sure that this actually happens and work cooperatively on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. James McFadden, then Dean Murakami, and then Karen Saganor.
My name is James McFadden, and I speak as part of the old, more tenured faculty. I have been teaching at City College of San Francisco since 1973, and during most of those 42 years, I was part-time there and taught at College of San Mateo and Santa Rosa JC as well, so I've had a lot of experience. I want you to know that I enthusiastically support the task force finding that ACCJC lacks credibility, and I really appreciate the apparent recommendation of some urgency in this matter so that we find a new accreditor not 10 years from now, but by the spring. And I and other members of the City College faculty are very eager to work with the Board of Governors to identify a new accreditor and make a timely transition. California can't afford to have any other community colleges face the same fate that City College has faced. We have suffered tremendously as a result of the criminal behavior of ACCJC, with no complaint about the quality of our teaching or the quality of our education. We have gone from 100,000 students before this whole accreditation fiasco began to 70,000. And we don't know what happened to those other 30,000 students. There's been no great influx in other community colleges in our area since they dropped out of City College. And there doesn't seem to have been a huge influx of students into the four-year colleges. It seems clear that those 30,000 people just gave up out of a sense of frustration. Frustration at not being able to get the classes that they need. Frustration at
30 seconds.
At not at classes being canceled when they need them. The faculty at City College has done a heroic job trying to build up our enrollment, but it's going to take a long time, and we don't want to see this happen to any other community college in the state.
Thank you very much. Dean Murakami, Karen Saganar, and Roger Scott. Go ahead, Dean.
Thank you. Dean Murakami, representing the Community College Council for California Federation of Teachers, and I also often speak for the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. President Baum, Chancellor Harris, and the board, I just want to say that it's very unfortunate that the ACCJC has forced us to come to this point. And I truly appreciate the gravity of the decision that this Board of Governors must make in this regard. However, I do have to make several points. You know, I've been part of Consultation Council since the first task force. And this task force report has evolved over that number of iterations and over those years. And it has been done with all due deliberation and with sobering resolve. Numerous attempts have been made in the past to collaborate with ACCJC on many of these issues, and they have consistently and oftentimes completely disregarded them. And from my point of view, oftentimes the ACCJC has treated the State Chancellor's Office itself in utter disdain. Within an organization such as ACCJC, when it feels it doesn't have any need to be transparent or accountable to anyone, it can become belligerent and dictatorial. That is ACCJC. It regards its internal functions and apparent status above that of the needs of our students and the community those colleges serve. These issues are of concern of all the community colleges and all of the districts. As for these reasons, I urge you to vote in favor of this report, support the vote of no confidence in ACCJC, and approve the recommendation that a new accreditation organization and model be investigated. I also want to urge the Board of Governors to consider sending in a third-party comment to the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity that's due by September 25th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karen Saganar, Roger Scott, followed by Linda Sneed. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you very much. So I'm a librarian, and I want to provide you with a primary source that's readily available to you here. I heard earlier you were encouraged to read the 9 pages of the report. I'd like to also direct your attention to the last 4 pages. You don't even have to read them through. You can look at them. And in that's the end of the audit report that came out a year ago. And when that audit report came out, the president of ACCJC received it on June 4th, and on June 9th, she fired back a response to the auditor. And in that, she says that the report is all wrong, that they didn't really have the authority or the knowledge to do this, and she ends her letter by saying, such comments in the audit should be reviewed only as the personal opinion of the team. And so you can read that letter and see for yourself the lack of interest in change, lack of interest in making improvements, and then you can also look at the response. When this letter from Dr. Bino is really kind of typical of her writing. The only thing that's different is that this one was sent to somebody who isn't in her power. It was sent to the state auditor that cannot be disaccredited by ACCJC, and so you'll see that there are comments on that letter from the state auditor in which the state auditor identifies the various statements that were made and says, you know, that one of the statements was absolutely false, that there's a baseless claim made by the commission, and that this is factually inaccurate, the things that has been said by the commission. So you can see for yourself that the problem, I'm very happy that the report is forward-looking. I think that's really a great thing, and that it talks about what an ideal creditor would be. But I want you to understand, it's not that our creditor is not ideal, and we want one that will be ideal. The problem is our creditor is totally not meeting the basic minimum requirements of a creditor, in that our creditor makes false statements and baseless claims, and our creditor rejects criticism out of hand most of the time. As you've heard, there has been very little change, and that change has come very slowly. And for an organization that's supposed to be working with us about continuous quality improvement, let's look at what we're doing and see how we could do things better. We have people in charge of us who don't actually think that way. And for those reasons, you know, it's not that our creditor is not ideal, it's that the creditor we have now, the longer they stay in power, the more extensive and severe the damage they will do to our community colleges. So please act as swiftly as you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roger Scott, is Linda Sneed still here? You're up, Linda, next. And then Joanne Waddell. Okay, please go ahead, Roger.
This is a momentous day. Hearing the task force report reminded me of a movie, a great movie in my judgment, very interesting and intelligent, that I might be one of the few people in the room old enough to remember, 12 Angry Men. It's my often examined but still firm conclusion that Chancellor Harris and the members of this body who support him, and by extension a failed organization like the ACCJC, are not allies of the people or conscientious policymakers of California, of the California Community College system, which you've been appointed to oversee. It doesn't take much wisdom or sense of history to recognize that California needs the kind of educational system we had decades ago when the California Master Plan for Higher Education and the GI Bill ensured that public higher education would be available and accessible to the overwhelming majority of the people. Statistically, I'm sure that the people in this room have had educational opportunities that have changed their lives. I'm an ordinary person from a neighborhood where more of my classmates went to prison or to the military than to college. But I was fortunate enough to enroll at Texas Tech when the tuition was $25 a semester. That was before some of you were born. That experience led to a rewarding, productive, and interesting life, including the opportunity to teach in 4 countries. Immersion in other cultures and languages was also an important part of my education. That personal history, shaped by common sense and some altruism, has moved me to demand that others have the same educational opportunities I've had, especially in a state like California. I've been critical of Chancellor Harris and this body, and I stand by those criticisms, but the recent report that we just heard on the ACCJC reveals that we've reached a new era, and I would truly like to be your ally in the important work ahead. That might surprise Chancellor Harris. My allegiance and goodwill, however, have 3 contingencies. 1, your current written statement that other people have encouraged you to make to the Department of Education by next Friday, the 25th, that would include the quote that you've often heard today about the California Community College system and its member institutions having lost faith in the ACCJC, which is an understatement, I think. And in my view, Chancellor Harris would be the logical person to make that presentation to the Department of Education in December. Your commitment to implement the California Master Plan for Higher Education is the second, and you're accepting the educational and human responsibilities of providing to community college students the comprehensive courses, programs, and services they need and deserve. Thank you. And by the way, I know that Chancellor Harris was indulging in subtle ironic humor when he said replacing the ACCJC would be a multi-year project. We picked up on his humor.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We're in the home stretch here. Joanne Waddell, I'm sorry, Christine Hansen, and then Lynette Niaga. Those are all the cards I have for this item.
Chancellor Harris, President Baum, board members. I'm Joanne Waddell. I'm president of the Los Angeles College Faculty Guild, AFT 1521, representing 4,300 faculty on the 9 Los Angeles Community College campuses. I also serve as a vice president for CFT and as the Southern California vice president for the CFT Community College Council. This year I was honored by CFT to participate on the State Chancellor's Task Force in Accreditation, and I want to publicly thank my task force colleagues for their fierce and fearless willingness to do what was right and necessary. But titles and positions aside, my perspective is that of a 37-year community college instructor who cares very deeply for our students, our colleges, and our system. In those years, I have watched the accreditation process change, and I've seen the negative impact on resources and morale that those changes have brought without any return on investment to our students, our institutions, or our state. And so from that perspective, I urge the Board of Governors to do 3 things: adopt, develop, and do it now. First, adopt the task force recommendations unwaveringly, enthusiastically, without hesitation, and without reservation. Next, prioritize your work with the Chancellor to develop a process to select a new accreditor that exhibits the attributes outlined in the task force report will encourage the colleges to set their bars high and to be an incubator for passion in our students and a launching pad for innovation by our students. That environment will enhance student lives and will move the needle for the colleges and ultimately for the state of California. And finally, work quickly with stakeholders to identify a new accreditor, and this is important, in a reasonable and timely manner. A year or 2 is reasonable. Half a generation is not. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Christine Hansen.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much for the reactivation of the accreditation task force. The idea, however, that changes could take years strikes hard at the heart of the San Francisco Community College community. To survive, CCSF needs more here than robust conversation. Since the show cause and threatened closure by the ACCJC, there has been massive damage done to City College. Over 40,000 people have abandoned their educations. Unique and comprehensive programs have been gutted. Administrators that this body of governors have put in place have done much of this damage in the name of helping the school. To consider that changes to accreditation will take years and to allow San Francisco City College to dangle in the limbo world created by the ACCJC called restoration is to count on the college's demise, either at the hands of the ACCJC or by the continuing damage being done every day to the school. Under restoration, the major muscle, intelligence, and effort of the school are tasked to the perfection of minutia at the very moment when the resources must be put to resurrecting the school. A metaphor would be that an immense wildfire threatens the school, and instead of mounting the effort needed to put out the fire, the energies must be put instead towards repainting the house. A house that has been repainted several times, but found to be lacking not in quality, but in perfection. Imagine for a moment what it is like to be in the middle of a fire and told you must not pick up a shovel or a hose, but must continue to paint the house, else that house will be bulldozed. You as a body, as individuals, and also Chancellor Harris, please make completely clear to the Department of Education in the upcoming Federal Recognition Compliance Review for ACCJC, as they review the ACCJC's acceptance of the agency by others, that you have lost confidence in the ACCJC. Clearly and concisely state to Nasiki that the reign of terror that the ACCJC has held over the community colleges of the state must end today. Please.
30 seconds. Thank you. And Lynette Niaga.
Thank you. I am the president of the Community College Association, which is affiliated with the California Teachers Association. So these are my brothers and sisters from CFT, and I support what they say. But I also want to add that I actually saw the impact on one student, and I just want to tell you a brief story. This is a student who was at City College of San Francisco, and my sister was talking to him in San Mateo. He was working there, and he said, I have to leave City College because my program is because the college is closing down, and I won't be able to do the program I'm doing, which was in health science. And I've tried to find that program at CSM, but they told me that I would have to start over. Now, that may or may not be true, but in that student's mind, it was true. And my sister said to him, so what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm just going to work here with my parents, and I'm going to give up on going to school because I've put so much time into it, I can't do it anymore. That's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about our students. And I know you, as the Board of Governors and the Accreditation Task Force, cares about the students more than anything else. And that's why what we do about this matters. I want to express my strong support for the Accreditation Task Force. I know it took a great deal of courage for them to come out with this report, and I am sure that having seen all of this, that you as the Board of Governors will support them in the work that they have done on your behalf. I also am concerned about the timeline, but my colleagues have already expressed those concerns. I share those concerns. I share the concerns about the impact on students at Solano College and College of the Sequoias, which are our colleges. We also had the same experiences, not as drastic, but still a great impact. So what I want to say to you today is that there is a great deal of support for the Accreditation Task Force. You can hear the support. I just want you to know it comes from many sources, and we will stand behind them as we go forward with the next steps in this struggle to make the accreditation system what we need for it to be for our students.
Thank you.
So that concludes the public comment portion of this agenda item. I'd like to open it up to the board for either questions or comments. And then we'll Member Sumner.
I have a bunch, but I'm just going to focus on two. Why haven't we received anything in writing back from them as far as a response to how we're feeling about them from the ACCJC? I would think that they maybe would have shown up to sort of fight for them, to say this is why we've done it. And then the second question I have is, how long does it take to get a new accreditation? Once we choose them, how long does it take to make that happen? Because that's huge.
Vice Chancellor Walker, will you go to the table so as
let me try to answer both of those, and Pam can back me up as to why the commission has not responded. Shortly after the release of the report, we did get a letter from the commission asking that the task force come to a meeting of the commission to discuss the report. And they proposed that on the 9th of October. And frankly, I was uncomfortable having that meeting unless there were some ground rules laid for a meeting like that. And so I wrote back to the commission and said, yes, we would be more than happy to have a conversation about the report, but that the 9th was sooner than would work for us, and that I wanted Dr. Walker and some of the task force members to have a conversation about ground rules, and then we would schedule the meeting, preferably for late October, in advance of your next meeting. The commission wrote back and said that they were going to go ahead and have the meeting anyway, and so they have scheduled it for the 9th, like they said to begin with, and that they would still be willing to meet with us, but that it would probably be January, which was the next time when the commission met. So that was the response I got. As to the timing of a transition like this, as I said a moment ago, we would come back to you in November with recommendations on how we go forward in terms of identifying the next steps, and then we'd come back to you in March with a recommendation on a go-forward plan. And then how long it takes to transition 113 colleges to a new accreditor, really there are a number of variables in that make it difficult to predict. These accreditation cycles are 6 years in length currently, supposedly going to 7. So obviously you can't switch all those colleges at once, especially if they're currently accredited, until that cycle repeats itself. Otherwise you end up doing hundreds of self-studies all at one time. So it probably does take a period of time after you have selected a new accreditor and they are prepared to begin accrediting our institutions. And then there are existing rules now that talk about institutions that are under sanction on one commission being able to apply to another. So there are a myriad of steps. It makes it very difficult to predict how long. Let us say, for example, in March we made a recommendation to you to go with a different accreditor and you approved that. It's difficult to say how long from that point to having all 113 of our colleges transition to that new accreditor it would take. But it won't be a matter of months. It will be a matter of years.
I just have a quick process question. We took the action as the board to remove the language that specifies only the ACCJC as the accreditation agency. What does it take for a WASC or another accreditation agency to be authorized to accredit California community colleges?
Accreditors, or regional accreditors in the country, all accreditors, are authorized, or the U.S. Department of Education through NSEKI accredits the accreditors. And so the accreditor would have to be authorized to accredit associate degree granting institutions. The only one in our region currently authorized to do that is ACCJC. So the alternatives are to seek another accreditor in this region that could seek and gain acceptance from the U.S. Department of Education to accredit our colleges, or to seek another region's accreditor that currently has that authorization. So those are the alternatives that are available if the board were to decide to take that next step.
So we will be in active conversation with the Department of Education, but they will actually make whatever decision if there is a change in accreditor.
The U.S. Department of Education would have to authorize a transition of this kind, in that they have to approve the accreditor in this region to accredit associate degree granting institutions. So this board, by Title V, has the ability to select the accreditor for our colleges, but it has to be one, as the regulations say, that is authorized to accredit associate degree granting institutions in the Western region.
Member Malliam and then Member Budnick.
Not that I'm suggesting this, but is a third option that ACCJ stays and the entire organization leaves and we get a whole new organization and they reshuffle so they don't have to go through all those national things?
I think there are a myriad of options, and one of the reasons that we think the next 2 months are critical is to have further dialogue about what those options are. And then when we come to you in November, we will probably suggest a more direct course of action to determine. And I think there are a myriad of opportunities: finding an accreditor from another region, getting the senior commission to seek and receive ability to accredit our institutions. You may decide ultimately that a reconstituted existing commission makes sense, or a joining together of the two, the senior and the community college commission, as you would find in the other 5 regions in the country, makes sense. So there are a variety of alternatives. It's just a matter of getting from here to November and then ultimately November to March, coming to you with a solid recommendation.
Thank you.
Member Budnick.
When did the Chancellor's office receive the report?
2 weeks ago Friday? Yeah, about 2 weeks ago.
I mean, is there anything that we can, I mean, I know this is informational, is there anything that we can do as a board now to help you expedite this process, to give you any guiding principles? I mean, I think it was very clear what we heard from some very intelligent people. I wish there was some type of recommendation today that we could actually act on. So I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm more asking the board this question than the Chancellor's office. Do we believe that there's anything that we are all in agreement on that we can push forward with today? And has anyone thought of a motion to obviously not make full recommendations, but anything that could push us forward and gain us some momentum immediately?
Well, Member Bednick?
Go ahead.
I mean, I have actually a question to answer that. I don't know why and I would ask Chancellor and Vice Chancellor Walker maybe to respond to this. I don't know why we wouldn't transmit this report, because it's a really well-written report. Great writing, David. I had no idea you were so talented. I knew you were very talented, but it was really concise and very clear. And it was unanimous, which is also extremely impressive after having sat through a year and a half of these types of meetings. So I guess I'm asking the Chancellor, what is the harm in just transmitting this report to the Department of Education? I just want a little bit more information about what is this deadline, what is this consideration that I don't really quite understand what's happening and the deadline on Friday. If somebody could explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a federal NSEKI deadline, and it is fully our intention to transmit this report to the U.S. Department of Education between now and Friday. The reason that
Right.
we haven't stated that is because I make it a practice not to get out ahead of this board. So you're seeing it today. Tomorrow, I begin to communicate with the U.S. Department of Education.
So I would move. I'll just, can I make a motion?
I mean, we can't really make a motion, is my understanding. It's
Why
not
not?
an action
Why not?
item. Okay, well, I'll seek
So I'd like to
guidance
make a
from our
motion and make it an
counsel.
action item.
Okay, right. So I will seek guidance from our council. Are we able to, what are we able to do as a board to act on it?
What I understand since
No, I'm talking to our council.
Get ahead of yourself, Robney. You don't have the law degree yet.
Under the Bagley-Keene Act and the Brown Act, there is an ability, as long as the public is aware of what the subject matter is, that the board can convert an information item into an action item. However, I would advise that in the interest of the transparency of we making this known to the board, to the public rather, that this is an informational item, that we remain to have it as an informational item. However, the motion with regards to various activities that could be done with the report, for instance, the motion to send it to the Department of Education is a logistical motion and can be done.
That is right.
So wait, do we have
I was about to
want the
make a
Vice
motion.
President to make a motion.
I move that the Board of Governors direct the Chancellor to transmit the report of the Accreditation Task Force to the U.S. Department of Education before Friday this
Second.
week.
Is there anything that the Chancellor, this is the report of the task force.
That's right, it's the task force.
Is there a letter that should be attached to it from the Chancellor or to speak to?
That the Board of Governors directed that it be transmitted to the Department of Education for informational purposes.
So we have a motion and a second. We're going to talk about that motion first, and I want to make sure that the Chancellor has any either points or clarification he needs as far as the sense of the board.
No, I understand. You'd like me to write a letter to the U.S. Department of Education telling them that you've directed me to send this report to them. And I think, frankly, it's important that the letter spell out the findings in the report as well, because this is a big document and it would be easy to get lost in it.
Will you also convey that
Sounds perfect.
I'm going to ask for an amendment too. Will you convey that this report was presented at a public hearing and that there was considerable discussion about it, so that it wasn't just a report that was filed, but it was something that the board looked at very carefully.
That it was unanimous. The
Well,
recommendations of the task force were unanimous. That's really important.
Is there any other questions about the motion? Member Sumner.
Would it be appropriate to add to that, in the meantime, to have other agencies start getting information from other agencies so we're not behind the curveball, like other outside agencies that are accreditation? Start the ball rolling. Let people start making the bids coming forward. Why should we wait?
I'm going to weigh in just one thing.
I don't know.
I would prefer to have the chancellor recommend a process by which we go through the acting on the recommendations, so that. But I think the sense of the board is very enthusiastic about seeking alternatives. But I'd like the chancellor.
I would recommend that you wait until November to take that next step, because there are groups that you've heard about that are currently looking at the report and will make decisions about endorsement, and in some cases lack thereof. There may be at least one or two groups that come back and tell you they don't agree with this report. And so I think part of what we've done by providing you information now and coming back to you in November is we provided an opportunity for the field to have a conversation about this. And again, I don't think there's any reason to see that as a delaying tactic, because it's not.
Member Budnick and then Member Hawkins.
So, I mean, all the signs I'm getting from reading the report to hearing everyone on the same page in the commission, to hearing everyone in the public on the same page, to hearing Senator Nielsen, and although I don't agree with his politics, he is one of the greatest gentlemen of all time, his characterization of the CEO, and then hearing Chancellor Harris's comments on the October 9th meeting that you asked to delay, which they refused to delay. It just paints a picture to me that is that's very clear. Let's just leave it at that. And this comes back to timing for me. If hypothetically we found out, and this is not the case, but hypothetically we found out that a body that worked with us or someone we had contracted with us was in business with Mexican drug cartels and there was a federal investigation, we'd probably get out of business with them tomorrow. We wouldn't wait a decade. So I would just love, in terms of the November recommendations, to attempt to move with urgency rather than move like a bureaucracy.
Member Hawkins.
Thank you. Not that you don't, but I definitely want to make sure that the board has a copy of that letter when it's transmitted, Chancellor Harris.
Member Avalos.
Points too. I mean, to me, what I heard was it wasn't really the structure. To me, I mean, it felt like, in terms of review process, how it happens, the meticulous ways they look at review. I didn't find that as much. Maybe I didn't hear correctly, but I didn't find that was the big rub. What I found was the leadership, the personality, the direction of the organization we're talking about. So to me, going back to Member Malamu's question around, can we change the personnel and not the organization? That's kind of what I received from this conversation. Because, do we really want to wait a year or 2 years? I mean, is that a big, is that a long time to wait to have this process?
One of the things I do want to look at, because I'm excited about this process, and I think that our system has evolved considerably. We are now offering baccalaureate degrees, for example. We're now evolving in the fields that we're offering. Maybe an accreditation agency that also does four-year colleges and universities might be a more appropriate agency for which our schools should be looking at. And so I'm hoping that all of those, so I really appreciate the ideal attributes of an accrediting organization that are articulated here, because your task force member from Ventura, who said that it's focusing on improvement rather than compliance. That's what I would hope. I've served on accreditation visitation teams. It's how we can all work together. So, I think all things should be on the table, and then I'm hoping that there is an opportunity to then get some recommendations from the chancellor, especially at some point that we'll have to still talk to our current accreditation. A number of colleges just got reaccredited in June, and they have 6 years. And so no matter what anybody thinks, we're going to be working with this accreditor for at least the next several years. And so I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think I think your point is very well made. And my only initial response would be, I think that this report bears out that the field feels like the changes that the existing commission are making are too little too late, and that possibly just changing the people in the leadership roles might also be too little too late. Having said that, I think that there are options available to us that would involve leadership changes and therefore more open attitude toward bringing together the Western region, as is the case in the other 5 regions. And so when you look at this, there may be a relatively easy way to deal with this or a somewhat harder way. And I think time will tell which of those we get to do.
I mean, to me, it seems like it could be a multi-prong approach, right?
Yes.
You do short-term versus long-term. You do short-term, immediate, like Mr. Butnick mentioned, immediate, and then you go into long-term, which is, look at the other options that we have in front of us. So if the short-term doesn't work, at least we have the long-term ready to go.
I have to think, too, we're the official agency that interacts with the federal government when it comes to California community colleges. So by even taking the action that's on the table, that will send a very powerful message because even though we don't authorize we don't accredit accreditors, we still speak for the system.
That's right.
And I've got to think that the Department of Education will listen very carefully to what the Board of Governors and the Chancellor have found.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on this? I'm going to go ahead, Member Belinsky.
Just when you go to the vote, I want to recuse myself from the vote.
I was going to
not abstain, but recuse.
Sure. And because of the importance of this vote, I'm going to ask for a roll call of this on this particular topic. Is there anybody else that would wish to speak to the motion? Okay, so. And just if you could restate the motion as you have it so we're clear. So you don't want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to restate it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Karen, I thought you were going to, but I'll restate it. The motion is that the Board of Governors direct the Chancellor to transmit the report of the task force to U.S. Department of Education by this Friday, September 25th, and that there be a cover letter that directs the Department of Education to the recommendations of the task force, notes the unanimous vote of the task force members, and that the Board of Governors has asked that this be transmitted to the Department of Education. Did I get it all?
Yep.
Arnaldo Avalos.
Yeah, A, yes.
Jeffrey Baum.
Aye.
Joseph Belinsky.
Recused.
Scott Budnick.
Aye.
Jeff Burdick.
Aye.
Connie Conway.
Aye.
Thomas Epstein.
Aye.
Cecilia Estelano.
Aye.
Danny Hawkins.
Aye.
Revney Kaur. Deborah Malumed.
Aye.
Gary Reed. Valerie Shaw. Nancy Sumner.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. The Chancellor will share with us the correspondence and with the Department of Education. We'll now move on to item.
Yeah, just so that the minutes do
Yes.
say that. Just so the minutes do say I was recused.
Yes.
Say unanimous.
Right.
Right.
With one recusal, correct.